which are in it, resulting into what is atrial fibrillation. That is, the normal connection of SA, AV, and then bundle of His is affected because of the distortion and disorganization of the atrial muscle, which was because of a result of dilatation. The problem of atrial fibrillation doesn't finish here. Now, what has happened is atrial fibrillation is fast working or fast rate of the atria, where the ventricle rate remains same. So now what happens is that normally when the atria contracts, the ventricle should contract. There is a synchronization. Now what is happening here is atria is working more, ventricle is working at its normal pace. So when it is working, there are phases when the valve is not only open but it is closed. So why? Because majority the say it is like if there are 100 atrial beats, there are just 60 ventricle beats. So there would be 40 atrial beats when the ventricle would be closed through the mitral valve to get the not to receive the blood. So now this causes is that the atria dilated, mitral valves closed, rate of atria working is more, so it almost produces a churning effect, Makhan type effect. Finally, a clot gets formed. This clot can be life threatening. I'll elaborate later on. Incidence of AF goes on increasing with age. Understandably, the fibers are disorganized, aging causes more disorganization. So it is a rule 80% of patients of mitral stenosis over the time go into AF, and because of the AF, they further result into increased pressure of the left atrium because the atria is working against it closed. So we had pulmonary arterial hypertension. Now, on top of that, we have a rhythm disturbance, and because of the rhythm disturbance, the pressure are further being followed or referred back to the pulmonary vessels. And as I said, it is only 20% patients who would have normal sinus rhythm, otherwise majority would have this. When we talk about pulmonary atrial hypertension, right ventricular failure, or atrial fibrillation, one hallmark of mitral stenosis is hemoptysis. Why it is so? It is because of the pulmonary apoplexy. Why apoplexy? Because those veins which were under increased pressures, backward pressures, now suddenly rupture. The fluid or lymphatics and the fluid around the heart was in the lung was not well taken. There is pulmonary edema, so again there is a chance of the pink frothy sputum. Pulmonary infarctions are known because of the atrial fibrillation. Because the lungs now are congested, so there is an increased chances of infections, and chronic bronchitis or what is known as winter bronchitis is very common, and the old healed ones may have shown signs of pulmonary hemosiderosis wherever the blood had spilled over. These apoplexy, edema, infarction, bronchitis, hemosiderosis, they go on simultaneously. Not all have it, but there's always an increased tendency. So patients with mitral stenosis may present with hemoptysis as well. So if we have to look into the symptoms of the patients of mitral stenosis, generally the red ones, if you follow on the screens, hemoptysis, dyspnea, thromboembolism. Thromboembolism because the clot that had occurred because of because of the atrial fibrillation. These are the three symptoms which need immediate attention, and giving company to them is cough because of the congestion, chest pain because of the pulmonary arterial hypertension. Atrial fibrillation is a fast working, so it is palpitation may follow. Somewhere during this time, the outputs are affected. Because of the output, there is fatigue, and edema ascites because of right ventricle failure is a rule. In the symptoms, in mitral stenosis, history of hemoptysis, breathlessness, thromboembolism, presently or in the past is very important. The rest may just add to the symptoms. One very peculiar phenomena which is noticed in mitral stenosis is because of the compression of the left recurrent laryngeal nerve. Why it gets compressed? This left atrium was dilating. So back in the or the pulmonary artery was dilating because of the pressure. Now they caused compression of this nerve, which is known as Ortner's syndrome. Also, what is in simpler words, hoarseness. So hoarseness of voice is another bad sign which should not be overlooked. If the symptoms of hemoptysis or breathlessness or thromboembolism have been well identified, what are the signs that we are looking for? 80% patients would be presenting with atrial fibrillation, which is more as the patient ages. Low cardiac output, which is produces almost pinch face, which are known as mitral phases. But it is the auscultation which brings to you because why auscultation is important? The hemodynamics have changed. The turbulence of blood is being produced. It is more erratic, it is more eccentric rather than the laminar flow one would have found in a normal working valve. Pressure is high in the left atrium. Pressure is high in the left ventricle. Generally, left ventricle pressures are higher than left atrium, but here is a condition where left atrium pressures have already built enough. So it is a situation of a door during the storm season. Whenever it is very windy, you can always know how does the door, they start making noises. They suddenly open, they make sharp noises. So the the valve in question here is mitral. So if it is sharply opening because of the pressure high, this causes loud first heart sound. Generally the doors should not make a noise, but on a windy day, on a stormy day, these we know that wind has come because the doors are now making noise. So the valve will also, that is the opening snap. Once the doors have opened, the blood should flow. Blood flows from atria to ventricle during diastole. So the filling of diastole is now erratic. It is not laminar. So because of that, there is turbulence of the flow, and this causes mid-diastolic murmur because maximum blood would be coming from atria to ventricle in the mid-diastole. As the valve opens, it takes time for the maximum influx, as would be in a picture hall that once you open the door, it takes the first ones go smoothly, but later ones almost jam in. So here the jamming is mid-diastolic murmur. The last one just rushed through it, so there would be a pre-systolic accentuation. And because the pressures in the pulmonary vessels were high, higher the pressures, the more the sound a door would produce when it closes. So there is loud P2. So what we found on find in the auscultation is a loud first heart sound, an opening snap, mid-diastolic murmur, pre-systolic accentuations, and a loud P2. Giving company is in the lungs because the lungs are wet, crepitations. If the crepitations, as we talked in the heart failure class, if they are not well taken care of, pleural effusion is right more common than the left may occur. Simultaneously, we have the right ventricular enlargement, so it is bound to produce right ventricular heave because of pulmonary hypertension. Two things which are on the slide: one is the loud P2 and right ventricular heave, which are showing pulmonary hypertension, which generally accompanies mitral stenosis. This figure only accentuates that if we see in the center, we have a S1, A2, P2, OS, MDM. This is all what? That the closure is loud, that is S1, followed by, once they're closed, the blood now flows into the aorta. Now once the whole blood has flown, the aortic valve and pulmonary valve will close. And the moment they are closed, the mitral valve is waiting for the pressure to. Now here the pressures are high, so the opening snap will come because sharpness is because of the pressure gradient that has been created. We have the MDM murmur, and just when the systole is about to restart, systole is generally marked by the closure of mitral and tricuspid valve. There is again accentuation. This is known as pre-systolic accentuation. Just in the center of it, it is depicted. Some more fine points about it. Whenever the door is pliable, it will produce a sound. Whenever a door is congested, thick, it will not. So same is true for mitral valve. So mitral valve here is under pressure. So on a windy day, it will produce. Windy day here is the pressure in the left atrium. So there will be a sharp accentuated S1, and there would be a presence of an opening snap. That is the sound of the opening of the valve. Generally, valves produce sound on closure. They don't produce opening, but because of the sudden pressure release, the opening of the door also produces, as would happen with a windy day. Can on auscultation we judge the severity of MS? Yes, we can judge the severity of the MS. Going back to the discussion where there was the closure of the A2 and P2, and then there was a sound which was OS, opening snap. This opening snap will depend upon how quickly it is takes over the pressure which was created in the ventricle. So higher the pressure in the left atrium, opening would be much easy because all pressure has been decompressed by the flow of blood to the aorta, and now ventricle is at its least pressure when it is now ready to open in diastole. So whenever closer the distance between the S2 and the OS means the OS is depicting the pressure, means the severity is high. The severity of the pressure is by the stenosis of the valve. Secondly, if it takes more time of the diastole for the blood to flow. Obviously, that means that the stenosis, if it was smaller, it was a lesser stenosis, the blood would flow freely, and this turbulence would be over some time. But if the blood flow is for a longer time, it definitely indicates the severity. The severity of MS, 2 points, narrow S2 OS gap, and duration of mid diastole murmur. Does the sound tell us much more beyond that? If the sharp sound was of that pliable, now if the door gets thickened, it gets wet. Same mechanism is true for MS. That mitral stenosis, if it is calcified, the pliability of the valves gets less, the sharpness of the S1 goes off. So S1 can be soft. When I talk about MRAR, I'll elaborate on the softness of S1 there. If the opening sap becomes absent, right? It means the door is opening, but not the new. It is, as we know from our common knowledge, only the new doors produce sounds. As the doors get older, the sounds disappear. So this now has disappeared because it has calcified fibrils. It has aged. So absent of opening snap, soft S1 is indicative of that the mitral stenosis is because of the calcified valve, whereas sharpness indicates of a pliable valve. It is not everything is happening between atria and the ventricle. The, the effect, hemodynamic effects were in the pulmonary segment on the right ventricle. So are there other murmurs? Well, because there is a higher pressure, so pulmonary ejection sounds. As there was a opening snap sound, so the gushing because of the pressure stories, there is a pulmonary ejection sound in the pulmonary area. The right ventricle hypertrophied and then dilated. The annulus was stretched. So tricuspid murmur, regurgitation murmur, a holocystic murmur, is also auscultable, giving company to that MDM of mitral stenosis. The pulmonary vessels first got thickened, then gradually, as the hypertrophy of right ventricle dilated, so the vessels would also dilate. Now, when they dilate, the appropriation of the pulmonary valves to each other, which should have resulted into a closure, is now defective. This results into pulmonary regurgitation. So, by rule, we have ejection systolic murmur, but as the disease got older, the grand scale murmur, which is decrescendo murmur heard in the pulmonary area, would be giving company to a tricuspid regurg in, in the background of a mitral stenosis. These all are indicating the presence of ejection systolic, the grand stele, or TR. The severe disease is there. The impact of the disease is much more on the pulmonary vessels and the tricuspid valve. We looked into the symptoms, we know the etiology, but we now want to investigate because now by clinical science it has come out to be looks like mitral stenosis. Does ECG help us? Yes. P mitral, as from your ECG classes you all know, P mitral is an indication of left atrial hypertrophy, and here the left atrial hypertrophy is occurred as we have already discussed. It also results into right ventricular hypertrophy changes, should also be seen because pulmonary atrial hypertension resulted. 80% patients would have atrial fibrillation. So on an ECG in a patient of MS, expected are P mitral, right ventricular hypertrophy, or atrial fibrillation. Does the X-ray help us? Chest X-ray does definitely help us. It will show you on your right side of a X-ray chest, on the left side on the X-ray, there is the prominence. Generally, the left side of the heart in an X-ray is less prominent than the right side, and all appears everything is on the right side of the heart. If if we go by my position, but if you see the X-ray, it is the vice versa. I'll elaborate again. That when we see the X-ray, on the bulk of the heart on the X-ray is seen on the left side, and the part is seen on the right side. If the part on the right side become prominent, the two structures which are responsible is left atrium and the right ventricle. So if it is prominent, it indicates left atrial or left ventricle or right ventricular enlargement. But anything which is on the left side generally indicates left ventricular hypertrophy. That is a general lecture. Now coming back to this, there would be evidence of left atrial enlargement. That is, the right contour of the heart, right side contour would become prominent. The pulmonary venous hypertension, pulmonary atrial hypertension, that is a dilated pulmonary artery, would be visible. I'll show you in the X-rays subsequently. Generally, there is no cardiomegaly because throughout this discussion, left ventricle was never involved. The pressures are either high in the left atrium, in the pulmonary vessels, or in the right ventricle. So if there is a cardiomegaly, suspect other associated lesions. This heart will give you, this X-ray will give you, if you see in the X-ray, though facing is the right side, but it is the left side of the heart. That is why when I started the discussion, there was this uh, understanding. So if we see on the right hand side of yours, which is the left part of the heart, the border is almost straightened. This straightened is the arteries are depicted here because the arteries have now dilated. If you see on the right side of the on the left hand or the right side of the heart, the right contour of the heart is quite formidable, indicating that left atrium may be involved. I'll give you better X-rays after some time. Well, X-ray and EC just suggested. Is there a direct way? We expected the cusp to be thickened. We expect the valve area to be reduced. We expect the left atrium to be enlarged. We expect the, if there has been an atrial fibrillation, the clot may be there, as has been the understanding. And the diastolic filling rate from atria to the ventricle should be reduced because there is an possible obstruction to the normal flow and the left ventricular functions. To look into all these aspects, we do the echo. 2D echo is done. It tells us about the thickened immobile cusp and their structures. What is the orifice? Is it, how much less is it from 4 to 6 centimeter size? What is the size of the left atrium? Larger it is, more chances of having an atrial fibrillation. The clot, if it is there, we need some special investigation, which was not evident from an ECG or an X-ray. And diastolic, longer it takes, severity of the disease. Largely, left ventricle functions are not likely to be expected, but because if the etiology is rheumatic fever, some part of the myocardium may be involved. But for understanding of mitral stenosis, left ventricle functions should be normal. These were showing the effects. The pressure effects can be studied by the effect of Doppler. That is, there is a pressure gradient between the mitral and the mitral valve across atria and the ventricle. So higher the pressure means more the obstruction, and this obstruction will be producing pressure on the pulmonary artery. So pulmonary artery pressures and pressure gradients are studied with the help of Doppler. Rest is studied by the echo. So echo is almost in toto a complete investigation which helps you. ECG only supplements you with one thing, that is the rhythm, and X-ray chest only tells you added lesions if it is, but they will be punted by echo. X-ray is more for the parenchymal lung structures if it is possible, which echo. So ECG for rhythm, X-ray for parenchyma, and echo for total functions. Well, cardiac catheterization used to be used in the past. I don't elaborate much on that. So based on the echo, one can score the mitral valves. Less than 2 centimeter brings symptoms. So anything which is between 1.5 to 2 is mild mitral stenosis. It is, if it is between 1 to 1.5, it is moderate mitral stenosis. If it is less than 1, but less than 1, it is severe, and those which are less than 0.5 are critical. Critical means they need immediate attention. So based by the MS on echo, which yes, you get an idea on auscultation, but the best idea would be by the echo, and the orifice, as it goes lesser, the criticality and severity increases. The mean gradient on the right hand side, as you see, as the valve is getting stenosed, the gradient is rising. But those interested in numbers 5, 10, 20, and more than 20. But more important is mild, moderate, severe, and critical mitral stenosis based on the orifice. So now we have graded it. We know that there is no, is there a clot or not? That was what. So it's time to treat. For treatment, we have in mind the breathlessness, hemoptysis, fast atrial fibrillation rate, and thromboembolism. There is fluid both on the right ventricle, there is fluid both in the left ventricle. So diuretics is treatment of choice. The ventricular rate can only be brought down by the AV node blocking drugs. For this, beta blockers, calcium channel, or digoxin may be used, either of them or a combination of them. With what target? The target should be that when the patient is resting, the ventricular response. Here it should be clarified that it is not the atrial rate, it is the ventricular rate, because what matters for the flow of blood across the aorta or into the aorta is the ventricular rate. It should be 60 to 80 at rest, and should not be less, should remain less than when patient is exercising, less than 100. So the target of AV nodal drug is 60 to 80, less than 100 at exercise. Those patients who had embolism should be put on oral anticoagulants, maintaining the INR 2 to 3. If we maintain the heart rate, ventricular response, we decongest, patients may remain symptomatic for years together. But some may not be lucky, or many more may not be lucky. Patient remaining symptomatic despite medical treatment, and once they are symptomatic, the back pressure is going on. So there is always a progressive pulmonary hypertension. Now this progressive pulmonary hypertension needs to be checked, because the more we delay, the changes becomes irreversible. So surgical intervention is attempted whenever the drugs fail to produce an asymptomatic state, or we have an evidence that despite better symptomatic state, I will not say asymptomatic, there is a progressive pulmonary hypertension. In this case, we go for balloon valvoplasty, mitral valvotomy, or mitral valve replacement. The upper two are something what we understand is the repair. Can we repair it? Can we open it? And if we cannot open it, then the valve has to be replaced. So we have two options: either repair by valvoplasty or valvotomy, or replace it. Mitral valvoplasty is a procedure which requires least hospitalization, least hospital stay. It is very convenient. I'll show you the procedure also. But where it should be attempted? It should be attempted whenever there is an isolated mitral stenosis. There should be no regurg. The valve should be mobile. I'll elaborate why it is important on these points. The valve should be non-calcified. The underlying apparatus should be free. That means the process is only on the cusp, not below. And it should be free of thrombus. So in case there is no thrombus, the subvalvular apparatus is normal, the valve is not calcified, it is mobile, it is pliable, and most importantly, there's no regurgitation. Go ahead with valvoplasty. If mitral balloon valvoplasty cannot be attempted, then one should go for surgical close or open mitral valve. That way we are repairing it. Why we are repairing it? Because there is this valve can be repaired because it is non-calcified, it is mobile, and the apparatus of the door is cusp, is good enough. Now this picture, this is a pictorial representation. What happens is that a balloon-like catheter is put across the mitral valve. Now how do we put it? It is that we go through the vessels, rupture it. Transseptal rupture is done at the atria. We know there is always a site there. We now, through the right atrium, through the septal rupture, we come to the left atrium, and we put this catheter, figure B, in between the mitral valve. This is now, the balloon is now dilated, and then it is pulled up. Now once it is pulled up, there would be the pressure in between the two cusps, the anterior and posterior. So now because of the sustain, we have been able to dilate it. Once we dilate it, because now the configuration is disturbed, this might result into a mild MR, but definitely the valve orifice will be increased because the transient balloon which was put in and inflated has now opened the space in between. It is just like putting fingers or putting a balloon. Finger one is known as valvotomy, and so now if we go through the procedure, if our valves were calcified, this would not be easy. If they were non-pliable, it would not have been easy. If there was a space in between, that is mitral regurg, it would not have been easy. If there was a clot inside, it would not have been, because the clot would have been dislodged. That is why we had all these conditions to say that there is no regurg, mobile, non-calcified. The apparatus is normal and is free of thrombus. That is balloon valvoplasty. Now, repair generally should be performed, but in case there is an MR, the valves are more calcified, and there are other associations, then the valve needs to be repaired. So the criteria for mitral valve replacement in MS would be an associated MR. Underlying apparatus is all bad. So whatever you may do, you may dilate the space, but the lower down the caudices are not working well. We had done the procedure successfully in the past of valvoplasty, but it is now restenosis, which is known, because after all it is a structure where the turbulence is bad. Or there is a failed valvotomy that we attempted, but it is there. Mitral valve replacement should be done, which can be replaced by mitral valves or by the biological prosthetic valves. So two procedures, the valvoplasty, valvotomy as a repair and replacement as surgery. All patients who undergo surgery should be on a 1 to 2 years interval follow-up for evidence of restenosis. To summarize, rheumatic heart disease is the leading cause of mitral stenosis. Obstruction to the blood flow causes an increased pressure in the left atrium. This causes the problem of pulmonary hypertension, which causes right ventricular failure. MS and fibrosis of atrial wall results into left atrial enlargement, which results into atrial fibrillation. Three symptoms to be always looked into is hemoptysis, dyspnea, thromboembolism. Auscultation, the loudness of the heart sound, the opening snap suggests the pliability if they are absent, but if there is, the hallmark is the mid-diastolic murmur. So we may not have loudness, we may not have an opening snap, but mid-diastolic murmur represents mitral stenosis. The lungs could be wet, or there could be right heart failure features. ECG more for atrial fibrillation, X-ray more for parenchymal lesions, but what is the diagnosis is through the echo, which tells you the severity and associations. Can be treated medically with diuretics and AV nodal rhythm drugs, but surgical is an alternative with balloon valvoplasty, valvotomy. If we have looked into the mitral stenosis, now just a few slides on mitral rigors. As I said, if the valve is diseased, mitral valve is diseased, it will either open less or it will close improperly. If you call it as improperly, it is mitral regurgitation. Let's go back into the hemodynamics. We have this mitral leaflet, mitral annulus, the commissures, the chordae, and the papillary muscles. So here in function is this gate, which is now the gate on the wall, on the muscle, is through the papillary muscle, the chordae tendineae, and the cusp. So anything disturbing would affect the working of the gate. That here in question is mitral valve. Again, two valves. It could be the anterior valve or the posterior valve not functioning, just like gate has two, right side, left side. Now, generally, whenever the mitral valve closes, all blood should go into the aorta. But if it doesn't close properly, the blood flows back into the left atrium. The left atrium, because there was a space in its closure, this is regurgitation. This regurgitation can come acutely, or they may come chronically. Now, whenever it is chronically, because it's a passive thing, as I'll talk about the pathophysiology, there is also changes in the left atrium. Let's look into the pathophysiology. The regurgitant mitral orifice, the volume overload is received by the left ventricle. What does mean is, normally with the forward flow, blood comes from the pulmonary vessels to the left atrium. Say, let's take 50. The whole blood from the left ventricle should have flowed into the aorta, but here 10 milliliters got back regurgitated into the left atrium. So now we have 50 plus 10. So there is increased amount of blood from the left atrium coming to the left ventricle, which has now to accommodate that left ventricle at the end of diastole. So there is a volume overload in the left ventricle. Because of this, gradually as the regurgitation increases, the LV dilation starts. Now this LV, because it is dilating, so this one hemodynamics which was missing in mitral stenosis is evident. That means the left ventricle gets affected. Now gets further, the backward flow of the left atrium causes, obviously 50 plus 10 was an increased volume in the left atrium. And when a strong chamber like left ventricle can enlarge, the left atrium is likely to enlarge much earlier because it's still a passive chamber. Now once it is left atrial enlarges, it communicates the pressure subtly to the vessels in the pulmonary circulation, because that is the feeding chamber. So the pressures now are passively being transmitted, and finally the result is pulmonary edema. So we have left ventricle which is enlarged, we have a left atrium which is enlarged, the pulmonary vessels are sluggish, so pulmonary edema, meaning thereby that the mitral regurg is an add-on volume which is now being accommodated by two chambers, and their pressure effect is being taken by the pulmonary vessels. Chronic MR is more important for us, could be primary or secondary. Whenever the leaflets or the chordae are involved, whenever the chordae, the leaflets are involved, the papillary muscles, The caudae and the leaflets, when they are involved, this process is known as primary. But we know that through the papillary muscle it was attached to the mitral. So any condition which is causing enlargement of the ventricle will pull the muscle. When it pulls the muscle, it pulls the papillary muscle. When it pulls the papillary muscle, the caudate tendon would be pulled. So the dynamics of the cusp are disturbed. So they would not. It is just like that you put something and not let the door close. So this tethering of the door or tethering of mitral valve here, what it causes, it begets the further process because the leakage would be permanent and the leakage will go on. So more blood would be there from left atrium, more left ventricle will dilate, more left ventricle will dilate, it will more pull up. So basically, secondary conditions are those conditions where primary factor is in the myocardium. Primary conditions are those of chronic MR where the leaflets are affected or the caudae are affected. This, if you look into the etiology, primary, yes, it's a myxomatous structure. So any mitral valve prolapse can be one reason. Rheumatic fever we have already discussed. Infective endocarditis because of its healing process can affect. Congenitally, it can be malformed, and radiation for any reasons can affect the valves much. So anything which is causing the valve or the caudae, that is leaflets and caudae rather than the whole valve, would be responsible for the primary MR. Whereas secondary MRs, as you can see the list, ischemic cardiomyopathy, dilated cardiomyopathy, where the heart has dilated. So it is now pulling at the annulus. So once it is pulling the annulus, it's putting the two doors apart. So there is a regurg. Hook'em, which is an asymmetrical thickening, again, they're not in position. And then the chronic AF states where the left atrium starts enlarging. If the lower left ventricle can pull, the left atrium can also pull. So now they are opposed. Connective tissue like RA, SLE, they affect the myocardium, they affect the valves. So they can primarily be the reason, they can be secondarily be the reason in this. So we have primary, secondary. In the chronic state, secondary is the myocardium per se. Acutely, they may come, it can be infective endocarditis, sudden rupture because of a MI because the blood supply to that muscle is gone. There might be the rupture because of some injury or a trauma. So caudal rupture, papillary muscle dysfunction, infective endocarditis. In all these processes, what happens is those compensations of left ventricle getting dilated, left, left atrium getting dilated are less. So what the effect would be? There would be more pressure in the lung through the pulmonary vessel because it is not a passive process. It has sudden happened. There is no time for the compensation, and so the lungs may dig. So the basic effect between the acute and the chronic MR is chronic takes years to build up these symptoms. The acute brings up acutely symptoms and generally should rule out conditions like trauma, MI, endocarditis. Well, the lungs are wet, so breathlessness. The cardiac output is affected because partly the blood flow is back into the atrium rather than the whole of going into aorta, so low cardiac outputs. Right ventricle is enlarging because of the pulmonary pressures, so you have edema, ascites, and of course atrial fibrillation because left atrium has enlarged. So we have symptoms of breathlessness, fatigue, edema, and palpitation. The missing link between mitral stenosis and this is in mitral stenosis you have, besides these symptoms, hemopsis, which is very common. So hemopsis generally is not a feature of MR because it's a passive process. It goes on. If you look into the signs, well, atrial dilatation leads to atrial fibrillation. So atrial fibrillation is there. Left ventricle has dilated, so there is cardiomegaly. This on auscultation, the two valves are not closing together. So when they are not closing properly, how would the sound be produced? So there would be soft S1, as I told you in my discussion on mitral stenosis, just brief by. There is a passage between the closed, the unopposed two valves, anterior and posterior. There is a regurgitant area. Throughout the time of systole, when the pressure of the left ventricle is higher than the left atrium, so entire blood which was to flow in the forward direction, the blood which is flowing into the atria would go on throughout the systole. So the pressure in the left ventricle is always higher than left atrium. The left ventricle should have pushed all the blood in the forward direction. Now whatever blood is going on, that will go on till the time in the systole it squeezes itself totally fully of the blood present in the left ventricle. So there is a pansystolic murmur. Now an increased amount of blood is present in the left atrium because of the normal flow plus this added amount. So suddenly when the left ventricle opens for or the mitral valve opens, once it should the dysfunction here is the closure. But when it opens properly, there is sudden gush of blood into the left ventricle. It is like an empty bucket and you suddenly put on the tap, there would be a sound. So because there is a gush, this is S3. So we have S3, we have pansystolic and soft S1 because the surfaces are opposing each other. The creps are there because of pulmonary edema, effusion because of left heart failure. The pulmonary hypertension is resulting into right ventricular heave, and the right ventricular heave and the right ventricular hypertrophy and dilatation results into right heart failure. So we have features of both left heart failure and right heart failure, as was being seen in the mitral stenosis as well. Just a pictorial depiction of it. The first S1, the first S1 would be very soft throughout the systole till the time the closure of aortic and pulmonary valve, the sounds would be produced. This is the pansystolic murmur. Why it is? Because the blood is continuously going from a higher pressure chamber, left ventricle, into left atrium. Now, once it stops, the valves open after P2, mitral valve. The blood suddenly gushes, and that is so we have soft systolic murmur and an S3. Does ECG help? ECG is different from the mitral stenosis. In mitral stenosis, we had left atrial enlargement, right ventricular hypertrophy, atrial fibrillation. But in MR, we would have left atrial enlargement, left ventricular hypertrophy because there is a volume. So the difference here is the left ventricle is hypertrophy and the bigger chamber would always show in the ECG. So ECG gives you a hint of an associated MR. We have a left X-ray chest will show us left atrium enlarged, left ventricle enlarged, congestion and edema. Now these X-rays, this was the X-ray I was talking about. If you see the MS X-ray, there is straightening of the left heart border, right? Prominence of the right heart border. This straightening is because of the fullness of the conus, which is after the aorta. Whereas when you see the MR X-ray, the difference here is enlarged. There is cardiomegaly. Why there is cardiomegaly? Expanding prominently on the left side because the left ventricle is dilated, unlike mitral stenosis where it was spared. So you have a smaller heart or a normal heart size in MS with straightening, but here there is a cardiomegaly of MR. That is the way we differentiate. Well, echo is our friend. It shows dilated left atrium, left ventricle. I've already elaborated on the MS class. It also shows the dynamics. Okay, what started it? Was it a muscle effect, or is it the cordae effect? Is it the papillary muscle which is resulting? So structural abnormality, the chamber effects, and of course the causative culprit, myocardium, that is whether it is primary or secondary. Dopplers, like there it helps in the pressures, here it helps in the quantifying the regurgitant flow. So echo is our best friend, supported by ECG which gives us a hint, and mitral and X-ray definitely showing evidence of enlargement. How do we treat? The medical treatment is diuresis because there is fluid all over in the lung on the right side, in the aorta. So there is a lower pressure aorta, lower pressure area. So and lower pressure flowing into the atrium because it was a lower. Now we have two chambers, so the amount of regurgitant would not go much to the left atrium and tend to flow into a lesser pressure area which has been created by the vasodilator. So So digoxin can reduce the atrial fibrillation and anticoagulants will help. Those with the lower ejection fractions may require ACE inhibitors. Surgical, yes, surgical maneuvers, especially those patients who still remained in severe symptomatic states. But in asymptomatic states, whenever the ejection fraction is less than 30-60% or the end systolic dimension would only increase when there is left ventricular enlargement. If they are more than 40 millimeters with new onset AF, there are two dimensions of two aspects asymptomatics. One is left ventricular ejection and the second one is more than 40 millimeters of end systolic dimension where the patient should be subjected to surgery. Otherwise, those symptomatic patients who did not respond to diuresis, your vasodilators or your digoxin therapy should be put on. This should be offered surgical corrections. Well, In mitral stenosis, it was more repair than replacement. But if you find that in a primary disease there are minor changes in the cusp, it should be repaired. But largely, MR for us is a replacement, unlike MS, where it was more of a repair. But as you can understand, it has a cusp, caudai, papillary muscle. If there is an individual papillary, it should be repaired. If there is a caudai rupture, it should be repaired. But it's a minor repair on the cusp, it should be repaired, but not for the, but the regurg means replacement. Only in special situations it can be repaired, but whenever we repair it, replace it, it is by a metallic valve. INR should be maintained as this. So dear, to summarize, it's the most frequent cause of mitral regurgitations are degenerative, ischemic, rheumatic, meaning thereby the disease both of valves as well as myocardium. Symptoms of breathlessness brings the patient to us most often. We have a soft S1, a pansystolic murmur, apical S3 because of diastolic filling. Watch out for signs of right heart failure, left heart failure, pulmonary hypertension. ECG shows evidence of left ventricular hypertrophy in addition to left atrial fibrillation. X-ray chest shows evidence of enlargement of left ventricle as when compared to the mitral stenosis. Generally managed medically, but if surgically, it should be replaced unless there are special situations where it is repaired. Thank you.